Today's guest on the podcast is Scott Douglas. He's a writer for Runner's World magazine and the author of several books, but the one that we talk about in this episode is The Athlete's Guide to CBD. I'm sure many of you have heard of CBD as a wellness trend, but in his book, he talks about the benefits and implications for athletes, which is a pretty interesting topic. Athletes really have a lot of reasons to pursue any competitive edge or recovery tool, and we talk about it in this podcast. It's a short one, but I hope you guys enjoy it and check out his book, The Athlete's Guide to CBD.
Welcome to the Same 24 Hours podcast with Meredith Atwood. We all have the same 24 hours each day, and it's what we do with those hours that makes all the difference between our health, happiness, and success.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Same 24 Hours podcast. I'm your host, Meredith Atwood. Today's guest is Scott Douglas. Hi, Scott.
Hello. How are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
Very well.
So congratulations on Pub Day yesterday for your new book. Let's talk about it.
Okay. Let's. Yeah.
Let's do that. Did anything special happen on Pub Day?
Yes, my wife made me a peach pie, and actually we sprinkled a little sort of crystallized CBD on the ice cream just to be silly.
That's great. Well, see, that's perfect. That's perfect. So your new book, The Athlete's Guide to CBD, where did the idea for this book come from?
The idea for the book came from my experience in the summer of 2018, sort of conducting my own experiment into whether CBD, which I had started to hear a lot about, might help me well, first of all, it might help me sleep, which would help me as a runner. I'm a longtime runner, and but I was also obviously curious if it would help me as an athlete. There at that time and even more now, there are a lot of sort of athlete-focused CBD brands. And so I sort of conducted this experiment with an open mind for a month, and I saw some pretty significant effects, good ones. And I wrote an article for Runner's World, sort of a very short version of the book that I now wrote, and just sort of took off from there. A lot of my running friends, once I told them what I was doing, they were very curious, because I'm sort of like the no snake oil guy.
Uh-huh.
And so when they're like, oh, wow, I've heard about this, but if you're interested in it, tell me more, sort of thing.
Right.
And that made me think that there'd be a lot of people who might be interested, with athletes sort of pretty broadly defined as someone who, works out with a purpose. So that's how it came about. Just sort of, I'm trying to like be the reader's guide to this thing that they've probably heard a lot about.
Right.
And just, try to hopefully explain it with both my sort of professional journalistic skepticism and my athlete skepticism, right? I mean, a lot of us, every day you could hear somebody will say something is like the key to doing something. So hopefully as, just sort of a guide to here's what I've learned. Here's how I think it's helped me. Here's what little research there is shows. Here's what some sort of innovative sports medicine people are doing. Here's what other athletes have, what their experiences are, and where might this all be going.
So what is something that you learned pretty quickly? Like, how quickly did you notice the effects?
My sleep improved within the first week. And to me, that'd be reason enough to take it.
Did you have trouble sleeping before, or was it just?
Yeah. I'm not the world's greatest. I haven't always been the world's greatest sleeper. So my sleep improved pretty quickly. At the time, I was on the verge of getting surgery for a meniscus tear. The only knee injury in 40 years of running. And I was probably going to get surgery on it in a few months. And I started noticing after about a month, like just sort of less overall creakiness, which I understand. It's not a scientific term, but
My knees are so creaky they could be scientific.
um, so that to me was like, wow, okay, that's when I was really sort of sold on a personal level. So that was after about a month, and also coinciding with about a month was an even more vague, subjective thing of just I felt I was recovering better from my workouts. I'm 55 years old, so it's pretty typical that 55-year-olds you don't recover as quickly from what you want to do compared to when you were 25.
Right.
And I just started feeling like I'm not as worn down like in the afternoon after a hard run. And then the next day, I still have to go easy the next day, and it's still smart for me to go easy the next day, but I don't feel dead when I'm doing it. I feel like, oh, I'm very happy to just go run easy rather than like I have no choice but to run slow and because I'm dead from yesterday's hard workout.
Right.
So the sort of knee improvement and the recovery thing that was after about a month, and the sleep was within the first week.
And so what are some of the myths that you kind of came across, and I don't know if we want to say debunked or uncovered, like what, because you hear all sorts of stuff about CBD. I mean, maybe we should kind of rewind and talk about what exactly is CBD.
Okay. It is short for a substance called, I hope I don't botch the pronunciation,
It's okay.
cannabidiol,
Yeah.
which is a cannabinoid. The most well-known cannabinoid is THC, the psychoactive ingredient in marijuana. CBD is one other cannabinoid found in the cannabis plant. CBD is made from industrial hemp, which has no more than 0.03% THC. So CBD is said to be non-psychoactive. In my book, I say it's better to say it's non-intoxicating because, if it reduces anxiety, as some people say that it does, I mean, that's a psychoactive effect.
Right.
So anyway, I'm splitting. Those are semantics, but so CBD is a compound that is found in the hemp plant and acts upon the cannabinoid receptors that we all have in our body. When someone reports a subjective high from THC, that is because the THC in the marijuana is acted upon their endocannabinoid system, and CBD does the same thing.
Okay. And so a lot of people say, I mean, I guess one of the myths, and maybe this isn't a myth, like, let's talk about drug testing. Like, if you're taking CBD, can you pop a positive on a drug test?
Theoretically, you could, yes. So, like I said, the CBD is supposed to be made from hemp that contains no more than 0.03% THC, right? But there are a lot of CBD products that aren't that go on the market without getting third-party testing, where they send a batch of their product off to a third party to do a chemical analysis of its components, and that hopefully shows that it is below this level.
So that would be the first warning. Like if someone is an employee of a drug-tested workplace, you might want to get a third-party tested brand.
Yes. Well, I think everybody should, just because
for safety.
Sure, because there's other things to look for, like lead and stuff. But certainly, if you're subject to drug place testing, yes. The other solution would be so most of the products are what are known as full spectrum products. So it has not only CBD but other parts of the plant. One of those parts theoretically being THC. You can also buy products that are CBD isolates. And so that should be that much safer in terms of being basically THC free. But I would always recommend going with a brand that goes to the trouble of paying for third-party testing. Right. I mean, there's a million brands, so why take your chance with somebody who you don't know what's in there?
Right, right. So what did the research show? You said there, I mean, obviously this is a pretty new trend. I mean, what you said 2008 really is kind of when it started. What is the research? I know it's brief. We don't know long-term effects, but what does the research basically kind of show?
Well, so the research that has been done to date is mostly on very like specific disease states. So there's one FDA-approved drug for 2 rare forms of epilepsy. That is, it's a CBD isolate. If you look on the National Institutes of Health website about sort of trials in process, most of them are along those lines. Mm-hmm. So they're looking to treat very specific diseases, spasticity in Parkinson's patients, for example, or neuropathic problems of the hand. And one reason for that is that they have that's a very clear marker. So if you have a child who's having 20 epileptic seizures a day and starts taking CBD and after a while has 4 epileptic seizures a day, that's a very easy thing to track. Mm-hmm. Right? So that's sort of the nature of research, is sort of these very specific things that you can track. That's a lot different than probably what a lot of listeners might care about. Better sleep, how do you quantify that?
Right.
Faster recovery, how do you quantify that? There has been some, one-off things on anxiety, such as giving a fairly high dose of CBD to people before public speaking, and they report much less anxiety before that. Given that some people, public speaking is said to be an even greater fear than the fear of death, so that's pretty.
That sounds about right.
Anxiety. So the research, in terms of like what the people who for my book might care about, there's really nothing, and there never is going to be, because there's just no, who has a financial interest in finding out whether you might have slightly less creakiness, as a middle-aged runner or cyclist, right? Even if you could quantify that, who's going to? And I should say a third reason for that is that, so because CBD comes from hemp, it's a natural product, it's considered in the public domain. So you can't patent it. The epilepsy drug that I spoke of, what they patented was the process for making the drug.
Right.
You can't come out with the same 24-hour CBD patent on CBD,
I can try.
Yeah. So there's a lot of reasons why, and it's a legitimate concern or question, like, right. Well, where's the research backing this up? I make the point in my book that there's a lot of things that athletes do that is similarly lacking in research, but we sort of, through trial and error, accept that they work.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah.
Down to the porta potties before the race. I mean, that works.
Yeah. Well, so there's no quote evidence that stretching helps prevent injury. Most people would, I think, if they, spend 10 minutes after every workout stretching, at the end of a month of doing that, they would probably feel better. Right. Even though there's no research, proving that. So that's sort of my argument. That's sort of my take on research, is that there's not much. What there is isn't about the stuff that athletes tend to care about, and there probably will never be. But that's not necessarily a reason to get hung up on it.
Right. So as far as like the delivery method of CBD, what did you find that was the most kind of desired for athletes and easiest and cheapest? Like how do you take the CBD?
Yeah. Unfortunately, nothing's cheapest. It's for people with disposable income. The most popular way are still the tinctures, the little 1 ounce jars, and you put a dropper full under your tongue and let it sit there for 30 to 60 seconds, which there supposedly increases absorption before you swallow it. that, yeah, that would probably be the best. I think that's the best way.
Yeah.
In the athletic realm, there's a whole, in the last year, there's been a big growth in sort of topical solutions
Right.
to treat sort of site-specific pain, inflammation, whatever. And so that's something that, you might see on more of a wellness site. You might see like a moisturizer with CBD, right? Or a sunscreen with CBD. But what these are, these are sort of like the CBD version of Icy Hot or Tiger Balm or Bengay. Something that like my heel hurts. I'm going to rub this stuff on it and hope that it, goes directly to the, where the inflammation actually is. So those would be the two big ones. They're now, I'm gathered stuff for an article I'm going to put up on the Runner's World site in a bit about sort of next generation CBD products. And so now there are recovery bars with CBD. There are recovery proteins with CBD.
Oh, mercy.
I have some, Willie Nelson has a CBD brand, and then he makes coffee and green tea and black tea with CBD in it. So you can get it in just about anything. I think for sort of normal, regular use, for me at least, tinctures are sort of a nice, easy way to quantify how much I'm taking, and just sort of part of my pre-bed routine. And then the topicals sort of just as warranted by aches and pains.
I have to wonder if Willie Nelson's is third-party tested.
Yeah, it's a good question. Yeah.
Love that guy. So what I guess you don't recommend anything, but what is kind of the starting dose for someone starting out with CBDs, an athlete?
Yeah, so all the sports med people I talked to about it, said it's the same as any other thing, like start low and slow, especially given the cost. Start at maybe 10 milligrams a day. And if you don't notice any sort of effects after a week, try twice as much. And most people land, I think, at about 25 to 30 milligrams a day. Mm-hmm. That said, among athletes, you could make the argument that they would maybe benefit from a little bit more, just because of pushing their bodies harder than sort of a general wellness person might. And one of the things that I've noticed over the past, even just like 6 months, is the ever increasing potency of these little 1 ounce tinctures. So like when I started looking into it, I don't know, 500 milligrams, 600 milligrams of CBD per 1 ounce tincture was sort of the norm. And so if there's, the 30 dropperfuls in this tincture, that would get you 600 milligrams, about 20 milligrams per dropperful. Now you can get in the same 1 ounce container. I've had one that's 3,000.
Right. And those taste like grass.
Or grass. Well, do you mean grass?
They're just gross. Grass gross, right? Is that like a term for pot? No, I mean like literal grass. They're just nasty. Like the more, the higher potency, the more they're. Whew.
Yeah. So what have you had?
So I do take CBD oil. I take brands. I use Pure Spectrum, and I think I take the 250 dropper. I don't know what milligram CBD that is though, but it's a 250 mil dropper, and okay. I take that once a day, and I do notice a remarkable difference in anxiety and sleep. Like I'm not a high anxiety person, but I have enough to where when I don't take the CBD oil, I notice it. I notice that I'm a little bit more like nuts today than normal. Yeah. But it's really interesting. I didn't take it for several months, and I just started back like maybe 2 weeks ago. And it's interesting you mentioned your knee, because I have a torn meniscus from 2 years ago, and it started driving me crazy a couple weeks ago. It just was, when you take steps and it kind of feels weak, like you're going to,
Yep.
And that was really bothering me. And I thought, oh gosh, I'm going to have to go get this looked at. And then I started the CBD, and I didn't make the connection, but my knee's not bothering me.
Hmm.
Could be.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And I mean, for me, so, and this is sort of, I think a sort of key point to make. It's like, it's more sort of like CBD, if it works for you, sort of allowing you to do the other things to make yourself the best that you can be. It's not like,
Right.
I still have a meniscus tear,
Right.
right? But it seems that the CBD got the sort of big inflammation under control. Then I could do the physical therapy exercises,
Right.
that strengthen the areas around it so that's now been almost a year and a half, that I don't
Yeah.
even think about it anymore.
Yeah,
Um,
exactly. Like, because it took the inflammation out. I think that's exactly it. Because I started squatting again. I've been squatting a
right.
couple weeks when I wasn't able to, because it just felt too weak. And I think
Right.
you're right. I think it took that edge off just enough to where I could get back into the squatting routine and build up the muscle around it. Yeah.
Yeah. And like in terms of sleep, like, I sort of joke in the book, like, don't take your CBD and then go take your phone to bed, right? And stare at your phone while you're trying to fall asleep, like let the CBD do its thing around other good practices,
Right.
that will help you have a good night's sleep.
Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely. Well, cool. So, The Athlete's Guide to CBD, and then you've written a bunch of other books.
I have. I'm
So,
guilty. Yes.
you're guilty.
Yeah.
And you're working on something else, so you're busy as a bee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, what is something that you do in your 24 hours? We all have the same 24 hours. So what is
Mhm.
something that you do every day that contributes to your best life, the best version of yourself?
Yeah. My answer is predictable. That's running. Um, I've
Mm.
I've I've been running for 40 years. I've averaged about an hour a day of running, it turns out, over that time. And that, to me, that's an incredible investment that you know, makes the other 23 hours of my day so much better. I'm a better person, husband, professional. I'm in better health, obviously, physically and mentally. Um, it's a predictable, boring answer, but my daily running is sort of the definitely a cornerstone of my life that you know makes everything better. And of course,
Yeah,
I enjoy it while I'm doing it too.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Well, thank you so much for sharing this. And you guys check out his book, The Athlete's Guide to CBD, especially if you got a knee problem, apparently.
yeah, or sleep problem. That's right.
That's right. That's right. Well, thank you, Scott.
Thank you.